Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today in this video, I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in February. First, two quick announcements before we start talking about the books I read. First of all, I apologize if the lighting in here is not very good. I know my face is a little shadowy. It's not a very sunny day out today, pretty dreary, but I have to film this right now, so my apologies if the quality is not great. Secondly, last week my TBR game, my Scrabble TBR game, was uploaded. However, I think YouTube messed up and didn't notify my subscribers or didn't push the video like they usually do, because I noticed it had a sharp decrease in views when the Scrabble TBR games are usually my most popular videos, and I know a lot of my subscribers just come for the TBR games. Looking at the analytics, the impressions on YouTube from my most recent TBR game last week were significantly lower than the impressions on all my other videos, so I think YouTube must have messed up somehow. I was really upset because I know so many people look forward to those videos and I was excited to do the Scrabble TBR again. So I am going to link that in the description and in the card in case you weren't notified that that video is up. YouTube is just a pain sometimes. I apologize. But please go check that video out if you are interested. I was really excited about the TBR and I would love it if you guys watched it. I realize I pointed in the wrong direction when I was talking about the card, but anyways, so please go watch the Scrabble TBR if you were not notified. My apologies, and now we can get into the wrap-up. So in the month of February, I read 6 books. However, a lot of them were on the shorter side, so that was a total of 1,482 pages, but my average star rating was 4.08. The lowest rating I gave a book was a 3, so overall I really enjoyed everything I read. The first book I read at the beginning of February, what feels like a million years ago now, was The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie, which I gave 4 stars. The ABC Murders is one of the Hercule Poirot mysteries, and it is a rare serial killer case for Poirot. There is a mysterious killer who is killing off victims for the letters of the alphabet, so Mrs. Asher in Andover, Betty Barnard in Bexhill, Sir Carmichael Clark in Churston. So the killer is going through the letters of the alphabet to kill somebody whose name and location starts with that letter. I did enjoy this one, and I will say the reveal of who the killer was not my #1 suspect. I was surprised by that. There is a person who the narrative is clearly pointing towards, so I knew obviously they could not be the killer because it's never just that simple. I'm having a hard time remembering exactly why I gave this 4 stars instead of 5. I think, sometimes it's just a feeling you get where you like a book, but it's not one of your new all-time favorites, because I really only give 5 stars to books that I absolutely love. And while this book didn't do anything wrong necessarily, I think, it just wasn't my new all-time fave Agatha Christie. And then there were none, my favorite Christie, which is a 5-star. It doesn't really compare to that one, but I still enjoyed it a lot. Next, I read An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena, and this was my 3rd Shari Lapena. I read A Stranger in the House, which I gave, I think, 2 stars, didn't really like that one. Then I read Someone We Know, which I gave 3 stars, and An Unwanted Guest was my favorite Shari Lapena, yet I ended up giving this one 4 stars. An Unwanted Guest is a closed circle mystery in the vein of Agatha Christie. A bunch of guests are all staying at this remote bed and breakfast in winter, and they end up being snowed in to the hotel without power and no way of contacting the outside world. Nobody can get to them because they are snowed in, the power is out, and the roads are too dangerous to drive. And then things get more complicated because while they are all trapped there together, someone dies. And while at first they think it's an accident, when a second body turns up, it's clear to them these are no accidents. Somebody inside the hotel is a killer, and if they don't figure out who it is, then the killer might continue to pick off the rest of them. An Unwanted Guest is not going to be one of my new favorite mysteries. It didn't do anything revolutionary, but it was fun and I was into it while I was reading it. There were some characters that I liked and some that I really hated, and I had several suspects about who I thought the killer might be. I didn't mean to keep talking about and then there were none in this video, but I used the same strategy to figure out the killer that I used when I was trying to figure out the killer and then there were none. When you have all these characters trapped together and you're following the different perspectives, I paid close attention to what each character was thinking, because if character X thinks to themselves, oh, I wonder if character Y is the killer, then obviously character X isn't the killer because they would know they are and they wouldn't have to wonder who the killer was. So using that strategy, I was able to narrow down the suspect pool to 3 people, and the killer ended up being one of those 3 people, but it was not the person who I thought it was, so I was still kind of surprised. There were times in this book where I was genuinely surprised by what was happening, and there were some good red herrings. However, I did have one major issue with the book. Maybe major issue is a little too harsh, and it involves who the killer ended up being, because while I think it made sense, this was one of the people who I thought might be the killer, I didn't really like their motive, and I don't think this is a spoiler because I'm going to talk in very vague terms, but if you're one of those people who really don't want to know anything about mysteries going in, you don't want to have any vague ideas in the back of your mind, then just skip to the next part of the video. But the thing that I disliked was the killer's motive relied on revealing information that we, the readers, had not previously been given. So there was no way you could have really predicted this motive, because after this person is revealed as the killer, we basically get a bunch of exposition explaining why they did this, and I just felt like that was a little cheap. I wish it had been hinted at more earlier in the book, because it involved this huge, elaborate backstory that the readers weren't clued into in any way earlier. Overall, though, this was a good read, and it was my favorite Sherry Lapena yet. Next, I'm going to go a bit out of chronological order because I want to talk about these next 2 books together. So for my class, Parallel Lives, the Shelleys and the Brownings, I reread one of my favorite classics, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and then I read another book by Mary Shelley, Valperga. I don't have my copy of Frankenstein because I gave it to my dad to borrow and he hasn't given it back to me yet and he hasn't read it. But obviously, Frankenstein, 5 stars. I love that book. However, Valperga, this was my lowest rated book of the month. I gave this 3 stars. It was okay, but it did leave a lot to be desired. I don't think I have to say much about Frankenstein. I'm sure everybody knows what this book is about. I really love it, so I won't waste your time gushing over it for 20 minutes. You can read my Goodreads review if you want more of my specific thoughts. I will link that in the description. I do think that Frankenstein has some slow parts, however, I would still encourage you to read it. Also, the framing device can be hard to get into, but once you power through that part and get into the real meat of the story, I think you would like it. So if you haven't read Frankenstein, check it out. One of my favorite classics. Now, Valperga is not nearly as well known as Frankenstein. When I read it, it had maybe 300 ratings on Goodreads, which is such a small number. And so this is a historical novel that takes place in Renaissance era Italy, and it does follow a main character who actually was a real historical figure. He had a biography written about him by Machiavelli, and Mary Shelley used the information from that biography to construct a fictional narrative about his life and how he eventually ended up becoming a tyrant. The issue I had with this novel is, first of all, it is pretty long and there are some really dense parts. Mary Shelley actually had her father, William Godwin, edit this book for her, and apparently before he edited it, it was significantly longer and he made significant edits. So I can only imagine what the original draft was like if this is the short version. I think there were some really good things about this though. The writing was impeccable. There were some really powerful lines in here, some of Mary Shelley's classic amazing writing that I appreciated, and I did like some of the characters. I think I would have liked this story so much better if it had a different main character. Let me explain. Because Castruccio, the main character, he's an anti-hero, he's not likable, nor is he meant to be. The thing is, I don't even think he was a super interesting villain. I just didn't care about him, I didn't love him, I didn't hate him, he was just fine. I think the female characters in this book were much more interesting. There's Euthanasia, who was Castruccio's childhood love interest, and yes, her name is spelled like the word euthanasia. That took some getting used to. But she was an interesting character because she is a woman of a strong moral compass, which I thought was interesting to read about, and she is the head of her family after losing her father and brothers. Then there was also Beatrice, who is a teenage girl that Castruccio meets and is involved with, and she was really interesting because we find out that Beatrice is the daughter of a deceased woman who claimed to be a female prophet, which is a super interesting story. I wish this book had been Beatrice's life story instead of Castruccio. I also really appreciated that even though Euthanasia and Beatrice were rivals for Castruccio's affection, they still built a friendship when they finally met. There was no girl-on-girl hate here, no women fighting over a man. We love to see it. Mary Shelley, feminist queen. So overall, there was good stuff going on here, and there were some really interesting parts. I kind of just wish it had been a different story, and maybe that's not fair of me to say, but I feel like this is the story of the least interesting character in the book. I wish this had been about Euthanasia and or Beatrice. I think it would have been a better book that way. Next, I read as an ebook How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Overall, I really did love this book. However, I had a few minor quibbles with it, so I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. This is a book on anti-racism, and overall I think it was a really good read. I think the author has an amazing writing style, and the way he balances statistics and information with things like history and his own personal life experience was really enjoyable. Even though this is nonfiction, it is definitely not dry, and I think it is compulsively readable. I also really appreciated the author's vulnerability and honesty when talking about his past. He talks about how he himself, as a Black man, did absorb the racist rhetoric in our society, and that he himself was racist in the past and had to go on a journey to unlearn those behaviors. A really important takeaway from this book is that Black people can be racist to other races and even towards their own race, and just because you are a member of one underprivileged group doesn't mean that you can't be racist or prejudiced towards other groups. You can be Black and be racist towards other races, you can be a woman and be racist, you can be a part of the LGBTQIA+ community and be racist, or sexist or anything like that. You can be Black and be homophobic. He talks about how he used to have homophobic beliefs that he had to unlearn. And I really appreciate how he was so honest about his journey, because I think that was really important. And I think that reading this book is going to help people on their own journey to be inclusive and an ally to different communities. I think my biggest issue with this book was his chapter on white people. And this is not me being a defensive white person. It's in this chapter, he is talking about how sometimes people of color can lump the entire white race together in their mind. And I understood the point he was trying to make, because basically he's saying, you know, you have to recognize that it's not like all white people are born racist. It's the world that makes people racist, and it's the system that we all need to fight. So I understood what he was trying to say with this chapter. However, I personally take an issue with him using the phrase anti-white racism, because as a white person, I do not believe there is such a thing as anti-white racism. I guess you could say prejudice. I think that's fair. However, to me, racism is systemic, and that's not something that white people in America are ever going to have to deal with. I wished he had used a different term. So while I do understand what he was trying to say, I did not agree with the terminology he used in that chapter. To me, the two things aren't comparable, you know? Any stereotypes I might face as a white person, to me, are not comparable to the systemic racism that Black people in America face, and the racism that other racial groups in America face. Overall, though, I would still recommend this book because it had a lot of good information, and there were so many different parts of the book where I was like, yes, yes, you're right, and you should say it. And if you too are going on a journey to become an anti-racist, then I think this would be a good book for you to read. I really did enjoy it. And finally, the last book that I read in February was You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. One day, while Shay Miller is on her way to work, she witnesses a woman she has never seen before throw herself in front of the oncoming train, committing suicide right before her eyes. Understandably, this has a huge emotional impact on Shay, and so she decides that she is going to go to this woman's funeral, where she ends up meeting the Moore sisters. She befriends the sisters, Cassandra and Jane, and finds herself getting more and more absorbed in their world. However, what secrets are the Moore sisters keeping? I gave this 4 stars because I did like it. However, it's a really tentative 4 stars. I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to rate this book. I did like it and I enjoyed it while I was reading it. However, I don't think it's a very memorable thriller. I already forgot a lot about it and I had to kind of refresh my memory to film this wrap up. And you know, I didn't read it that many weeks ago, so you think I would remember it more than I do. I think, considering it's a thriller, I wish it had been more thrilling. It wasn't the most fast-paced and it wasn't the most exciting thriller I've read. I think this book did go to some interesting places. There were 2 twists or reveals, one of which I predicted and the other I didn't. So I did enjoy this overall. However, it's not the most memorable thriller that I've read, and I don't see it sticking with me for a long time. I have read all 3 of Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen's books that they wrote together, and I think I would rank this one in the middle. I did not like it as much as The Wife Between Us, which had a super mind-blowing twist I never saw coming, but I did like it more than An Anonymous Girl, which I honestly found kind of boring and put on my most disappointing, wow, list of 2020. I think I need some water. I think I've been going on for too long because now I'm tripping over my words. Good thing this video is almost over. So there you have it. Those were the 6 books that I read in February. All in all, a solid reading month. Let me know in the comment section, what did you read in February? Have you read any of the books that I read? And if so, what did you think of them? I would love to hear your thoughts. Again, I am going to link my latest Scrabble TBR video in the description. I am so disappointed that YouTube messed me up and did not notify my subscribers about this video, or I don't know. It definitely had a significantly lower impressions than all my other videos, so something here went amiss, and I'm kind of frustrated. So the link's in the description if for some reason you didn't find out about the video. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a perfect rest of your day. Bye, and I hope to see you in the next video.